Have you ever wondered what it was like to fly before 9/11s? Back in the 90s, things were a whole lot different. Imagine this, walking through security without taking off your shoes, leaving your liquids in your bag, and even bringing a full-sized bottle of shampoo on board. It sounds unbelievable now, right? We'll be taking a trip down memory lane, comparing the airport security of the 1990s to the procedures we're accustomed to today. So, buckle up, folks, and get ready for a bumpy ride through the evolution of airport security. Before the events of September 11, 2001, airport security was a far cry from the stringent measures we see today. The atmosphere was more relaxed, almost carefree. Passengers ambled through checkpoints with ease, their biggest worry being whether their Walkman had enough batteries for the flight. The general public viewed airport security as a necessary formality, a minor inconvenience on the journey to their destination. There was a sense of trust, an unspoken agreement that everyone was there for the same reason, to travel safely. The security measures themselves were significantly less stringent. Metal detectors were present, but their sensitivity paled in comparison to today's standards. X-ray machines for carry-on luggage were commonplace, but the scrutiny applied to their contents was less intense. The concept of prohibited items existed, but the list was considerably shorter and enforcement was less rigorous. This relaxed approach to security wasn't due to negligence, it reflected a different era. The threat of terrorism existed, but it wasn't at the forefront of public consciousness. The focus was on passenger convenience, ensuring a smooth and efficient travel experience. This meant minimizing delays and reducing the intrusiveness of security procedures. The pre-9/11 security environment was a product of its time. It was an era defined by a different set of priorities, where the balance between security and passenger convenience was skewed towards the latter. This approach, while seemingly lax by today's standards, was considered adequate at the time, a reflection of the perceived threat level and the prevailing societal attitudes towards security. The events of 9/11 would drastically alter this landscape, ushering in a new era of heightened security measures and forever changing the way we travel. The once familiar sight of passengers leisurely strolling through security checkpoints would become a relic of the past, replaced by long lines, intrusive screenings, and a pervasive sense of vigilance. The world, and indeed air travel, would never be the same. Stepping back in time to the 1990s, airport security checkpoints were a different world altogether. Picture this. You'd approach a metal detector, a much simpler contraption than the sophisticated full-body scanners we see today. You wouldn't even think of removing your shoes. A quick walk through, maybe a beep if you had some loose change in your pocket and you were good to go. Next up, the X-ray machine. You'd place your carry-on bag on the conveyor belt, it would disappear into the tunnel of wonder, and a security officer, likely sporting a much bushier moustache than today's standards, would give the screen a cursory glance. The focus was primarily on identifying potential weapons like firearms or large knives. Liquids? No problem. You could bring your oversized bottle of water, your favorite shampoo, even that questionable bottle of homemade hot sauce your grandma insisted you take. The pace of the whole process was remarkably faster. Imagine this, no long queues snaking through the terminal, no frantic unpacking of laptops and liquids. You'd breeze through security, grab a cup of coffee, and still have time to browse the magazine rack before your flight. The efficiency was partly due to the simpler technology, but also because the volume of passengers was significantly lower compared to today's bustling airports. The simplicity of the screening process wasn't without its drawbacks, of course. The technology was less advanced, making it more challenging to detect certain types of threats. The focus on speed sometimes meant sacrificing thoroughness. But in the context of the time, with a different threat landscape and a greater emphasis on passenger convenience, this approach seemed to suffice. Looking back, it's fascinating to see how far airport security has come. The technology has evolved, the procedures have become more stringent, and our perception of risk has fundamentally changed. While we might marvel at the simplicity of 1990s airport security, it's important to remember the context of the time and appreciate the advancements that have been made to ensure our safety in the skies. Back in the 1990s, the process of checking your luggage was as straightforward as sending a postcard. You'd hand your bags over at the ticket counter, and off they went, disappearing behind a curtain with a promise to reappear at your destination. There was a certain mystique to it, a sense of trust that your belongings were in good hands, even if you didn't quite know what happened to them behind the scenes. The technology used to screen checked baggage in the 90s was a far cry from the sophisticated systems employed today. While X-ray machines were used, they lacked the advanced imaging capabilities we have now. The focus was primarily on identifying potentially dangerous items like explosives or firearms, but the ability to detect more subtle threats was limited. The human element of baggage screening also differed significantly. While security personnel were responsible for visually inspecting bags and operating the X-ray machines, the level of scrutiny applied was less intense compared to today's standards. The sheer volume of bags passing through the system, coupled with the limitations of the technology, meant that not every bag received a thorough inspection. This lack of comprehensive screening wasn't necessarily due to negligence. It reflected a different era in aviation security. The threat of terrorism existed, but it hadn't yet reached the forefront of public consciousness. The focus was on efficiency and passenger convenience, ensuring that bags were processed quickly and flights departed on time. In this pre-9/11 world, the trust placed in the checked baggage system was rarely questioned. Passengers went about their journeys confident that their belongings were being handled with care and that any potential threats would be detected. The events of 9/11 would shatter this sense of security, exposing vulnerabilities in the system and leading to a dramatic overhaul of airport security measures worldwide. Step back in time to the 1990s, and you'll find a different breed of airport security personnel. These weren't the highly trained TSA officers we're accustomed to today. Instead, private security companies often handled airport security, leading to a wide range of professionalism and training standards across different airports and airlines. These security officers, often clad in uniforms that screamed budget-friendly, were responsible for a multitude of tasks, from manning checkpoints to patrolling terminals. Some were retired law enforcement, bringing a wealth of experience to the role, while others were just starting their careers, learning the ropes of airport security. The training these officers received varied significantly. Some companies invested in comprehensive programs covering everything from threat detection to passenger interaction. Others provided minimal training, equipping their staff with little more than a uniform and a whistle. This inconsistency in training standards sometimes resulted in variations in security protocols and the effectiveness of threat detection. Despite the variability in training and professionalism, there was a certain charm to the airport security of the 1990s. Interactions with security personnel were often more relaxed and personable. There was a sense that these individuals were there to assist passengers, not just enforce rules. Of course, this more casual approach had its drawbacks, potentially leading to inconsistencies in security procedures and a greater reliance on individual judgment. The events of 9/11 would forever change the landscape of airport security. The need for standardized training, stricter protocols, and a more professionalized workforce became abundantly clear. The days of private security companies with varying standards were numbered, replaced by the centralized, federalized approach we see today. Imagine a time when you could breeze through airport security with barely a glance at your ID. Believe it or not, that was the reality in the 1990s. ID checks were a standard procedure, but the scrutiny applied was far less stringent than what we experience today. A driver's license, a student ID, even a library card. These were often sufficient to verify your identity and grant you access to the gate. The concept of a secure ID was still in its infancy. Driver's licenses, for example, lacked the sophisticated security features we take for granted today, such as holograms, microprinting, or magnetic stripes. The technology to create and verify these features was either unavailable or not widely implemented. This lack of advanced security features made it easier for individuals to travel under false pretenses. While instances of identity fraud were not unheard of, the perceived threat level was considerably lower. The focus was on facilitating travel, not necessarily on meticulously verifying every passenger's identity. The relaxed approach to ID checks was also a reflection of the times. The world was a different place, less interconnected, less technologically advanced, and arguably more trusting. The thought of someone boarding a plane with a fake ID to commit an act of terrorism was not at the forefront of everyone's minds. The events of 9/11 would fundamentally change the way we think about identity and security. The need for more robust ID verification became glaringly apparent, leading to the development of new technologies and stricter regulations. The days of flashing a library card and waltzing through security were over, replaced by a system that demanded greater accountability and vigilance. Picture this: you're at the airport about to send your loved ones off on their journey. You walk them all the way to the gate, sharing hugs, kisses, and last-minute instructions. Believe it or not, this was a common occurrence in the 1990s. Airports were more relaxed, more akin to bus stations in terms of accessibility. The concept of a sterile area where only ticketed passengers were allowed was much more fluid. Family and friends could accompany travelers right up to the gate, bidding them farewell as they boarded the plane. It was a more personal, less regimented experience, fostering a sense of community and shared excitement around the adventure of air travel. This open-door policy wasn't limited to farewells. People could also greet arriving passengers directly at the gate, waiting with anticipation as their loved ones disembarked. The arrival area was abuzz with reunions, filled with the joy of seeing familiar faces after a journey. This more relaxed approach to security zones was a reflection of the times. The threat of terrorism, while present, was not as pervasive in the public consciousness. Airports were seen as places of transit, not potential targets for attacks. The focus was on creating a welcoming, passenger-friendly environment. The events of 9/11 would dramatically alter this perception, leading to a significant tightening of security measures worldwide. The sterile area became sacrosanct, accessible only to ticketed passengers and authorized personnel. While this change enhanced security, it also altered the emotional landscape of air travel, removing a layer of personal connection that once existed. From relaxed ID checks to leisurely strolls through security, the 90s offered a starkly different airport experience. It was a time when convenience often trumped security, reflecting a different era in air travel. While we might long for the days of bringing full-size shampoo bottles on board, the reality is that security measures have evolved for a reason. It's a trade-off, sacrificing a bit of convenience for a lot more safety.